Thank the gentleman from New York, and now yield to my friend from Virginia, Mr. Bob Good, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Young, for being back with us. You know, it's astonishing that the President's most recent projected proposed budget actually increases over last year's record largest proposed budget ever. This new budget proposes some $4 trillion more in spending, some $5 trillion more in taxes on the American people. Now, last time you were with us, you had a little trouble with this question. I assume that you won't have trouble today. The national debt is how much now?
As you know, the national debt is about $34 trillion.
How quickly are we acquiring another trillion now?
I don't believe we take on debt by average a day, but
Okay, so it's increasing by $1 trillion every so,
Well,
how often?
interest rates, as you know,
No,
are not $1 trillion.
The debt is
They're
going
about
up. The debt is going up by $1 trillion. Approximately how many days or weeks or months? What would you say?
Well,
You aware of that?
let me point out, one of the cost drivers of
That's not.
or adding to the debt
reclaiming my
is
time.
not-
I
is
don't
not
want to know
$1
about
trillion.
reclaiming my
It
time.
focuses on
Thank
the
you.
debt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Do you know how quickly the debt is going up by $1 trillion?
I think we just,
I just think that would be an important thing to know as the budget director. It's going up about every 100 days or so, another trillion is being added to the debt. What will the debt per taxpayer be by the end of the President's projected 10-year budget? How much would an average citizen owe, or how much per citizen would we owe in debt with the President's projection?
well, Mr. Good, you know we don't tax citizens for debt
I
payment.
didn't ask you about tax and citizens. So the President's projected budget is going to go from $35 trillion roughly to how much the debt is going to go by his projection. Now, this is without extra supplemental emergency or extra spending. By his projection in his proposed budget, how much is he proposing to take the national debt to over 10 years? From the 35 trillion to how much in 10 years?
First, Mr. Good, you know debt is cumulative.
I'm asking
This
for
president
I'm
did
asking
not-
for a number. He put it in his
Mr. Chairman,
budget.
can we,
He put it in
Mr.
his
Chairman,
budget.
if
He put it.
parliamentary inquiry,
hold on,
is the
would the
witness
gentleman
allowed to
yield?
answer the question without constantly being
Clock is
interrupted?
still running.
We're going to give you the
2:45.
time. We will give you more time. He's asking a question. Director Young, answer his question to the best of your ability. If you don't know, say, I don't know, and then we'll keep going. So what's the question?
Let me re-ask my question. At the end of the President's, it's in writing, proposed budget, our national debt in 10 years will be how much? I just want $1. I don't want an explanation, just $1.
If you look on S1 in the
Hey,
budget.
let me stop you again.
Yep.
The only thing I want to hear is a dollar amount
Well,
in
you're
10
going to hear my
years.
answer.
Okay,
Which is
then
S1
I'm going
in
to stop
the
you and reclaim
budget.
my time. This is my time. It's $52 trillion. $52 trillion is what his proposed budget, I didn't make it up, it's his budget. It's in
the
writing
budget, and I'm
that it
telling
would go
people
from
where to look
34
for it.
trillion to 52 trillion in 10 years. Now, what does that amount equate to per citizen? If we take the 300, it's estimated, but the Census Bureau says we'll have 350 million Americans in 10 years, 350 million. So if you take the 52 trillion, divide by 350 million Americans, about how much per citizen is that?
Mr. Good, that is a false.
math
narrative.
question.
It is a false narrative.
No, the question
not
is,
build-
if we
do
take
not
the,
build my
reclaiming my
tax
time,
roll
thank
for
you, I didn't
Reclaiming
ask.
his time.
Reclaiming my time, if we take $52 trillion, we divide it by 350 million Americans, that comes out to how much? How much do we each owe? What is
Mr.
our
Good, I'm
share?
not playing into this narrative as if we
Okay, let me
bill
answer the
everyone
question for
a
you.
debt payment.
It's $150,000 per citizen is what the president is projecting without any emergency, supplemental, extra spending to take our national debt. That's what he's projecting to do, which equates to about $400,000 per household by his projection. Now, we have never had this level of debt in history. We have never had this level of debt to GDP since World War II, and I'm sure you're aware of that. How would the president propose we would respond to a major crisis, say World War III, or some other, the next virus situation or whatever, with this level of debt coming into it? How
Mr.
would
Good,
we
are we
respond
not
to
in a
that?
crisis situation now with what's going on in Ukraine?
We are-
What's going on in the Middle East?
Isn't it
This president
interesting?
has put
Isn't it
forth
interesting?
a plan
And
to respond to
reclaiming my
both
time,
of
thank you.
those
Reclaiming my time, thank you.
and the border
Reclaiming my
without
time,
this
Mr.
House
Chairman, I'm
acting.
reclaiming my
The
time.
gentleman reclaims his
I don't
time.
have a question there. Now, it's interesting on the priorities of this administration that the first thing you proclaim as the crisis is what's going on in Ukraine. I would submit that the president has created a debt crisis, unprecedented in our history. and he proposes to make it worse over the next 10 years because he wants to increase the debt by $18 trillion by his own budget. He has created a border crisis, which is further exacerbated by this budget, by the way, which does nothing to address the border crisis that he has created. But yet, when you speak of crisis, you bring up Ukraine because the president wants to borrow or print, some $60 billion and send it overseas to Ukraine. I think it's great that you are illustrating for the American people what this president's priorities are, both illustrated by his budget today and your inability to answer basic questions about the budget today and the impact upon the American people by the debt that he is willfully creating, and you go right to Ukraine.
The gentleman has 30 more seconds.
With the border supplemental, Mr. Good.
The gentleman's going to get 30 more seconds, and I'm going to give the gentlelady, Director Young, time to respond, but you get 30 more seconds.
Well, so does the president have an understanding what the impact is of his spending, his deficits, his growing debt on Bidenflation under which the American people are suffering? Does he understand the impact, again, of his spending, his borrowing, his printing, his debt that's causing the Bidenflation under which American people are suffering? Does he understand that?
And
With that, the gentleman's time has expired, but you will have as
Thank
much
you,
time
sir.
as you want to answer.
Mr. Chairman, I get why people don't want to give the president credit for 15 million jobs added, for unemployment being at a 50-year historic low, under 4% for 2 years. I get that. I get the grandstanding. But if you want to do something about the border, which I've heard a lot about, there was a bill right in front of Congress to provide resources and authorities, more than anybody could ever dreamed of in any
amnesty bill.
bipartisan scenario. But we choose to come in rooms like this to talk about the budget and blast the president who tried to do something about it. And
You are the budget director. You ought to be able to
I got
answer
it.
budget
Listen,
questions.
Listen, I've got the mic. The border has a cost. It's fair to bring it up. It's a significant cost, but the time's expired, and now Ms. Ballant